"Candace, what have you done to my daughter?" Marcus Whitmore's voice exploded across the backyard, hitting like a gunshot. It wasn't the tone of a man merely startled. It was the raw voice of a father pushed to the absolute brink. Candace whirled around, her wet footprints marking a trail across the pool deck. For a split second, her face registered utter shock. A deer caught in headlights. Anna, Marcus's precious 6-year-old daughter, was lying motionless in the shallow end of the pool. One of her arms was encased in a bright pink cast, angled awkwardly. Her lips were trembling as she fought to keep her face above the water. Her beloved teddy bear, Charlie, floated sadly beside her, soaked and utterly lifeless. She likes the water," Candace stammered, throwing her hands up in a gesture of exaggerated innocence. "She always says it calms her down, Marcus. You know that." Marcus didn't respond with words. He surged toward the edge of the pool, jumped in fully clothed, shoes and all, and scooped Anna into his arms, cradling her drenched little body against his chest. Water streamed from her cast as she clung to him, trembling uncontrollably. "Jesus," he muttered under his breath, his voice thick with a mix of panic and fury. "Your cast is completely soaked, Anna. Sweetheart, can you breathe? Are you okay?" She didn't speak. She hadn't spoken a single word in the 2 years since Rachel died. Anna had retreated into complete silence after the sudden passing of her mother, Marcus' late wife. Not a single word, just the occasional soft hum when she hugged Charlie, the tattered bear she carried everywhere. Now she just stared up at him, her eyes wide with a primal, paralyzing fear. He stood up, still holding her tightly, and slowly turned to face Candace, who now looked more offended than concerned. She slipped. Candace snapped, her voice sharp. "Why are you yelling at me like I deliberately shoved her in?" "I saw you," Marcus said, his voice dangerously calm, laced with ice. "You shoved her. You pushed my daughter into the pool with a broken arm." "She's being dramatic," Candace scoffed. "She's mute." "Candace," he said, taking a step forward, dripping wet. Anna was shaking in his arms. "She can't scream. Can't call for help. And you shoved her into a pool because what? She dropped her juice? Didn't say thank you fast enough? Don't talk to me like I'm a monster. Then stop acting like one." Without a moment's hesitation, Marcus grabbed Candace by the arm and shoved her straight into the pool. The splash echoed like a clap of thunder. Candace surfaced with a shriek, mascara running down her face, her hair plastered to her head. "You're insane." "Not insane," Marcus growled, his voice filled with a deep, protective rage. "I'm a father. One who finally woke up." Anna buried her face in his neck, soaking his shirt. Her tiny fingers gripped his collar with surprising strength. He held her even tighter and stormed into the house, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind, once clouded by doubt, was now cutting through the lies like a sharp blade, and everything began to fall into place. The bruises on Anna's shins that Candace had dismissed as clumsy playground accidents, the night terrors, the way Anna flinched whenever footsteps approached from behind, the day she refused to eat because Candace had cooked and something smelled like fear, and the camera footage. What about the cameras? Marcus had installed a state-of-the-art security system around the house the previous year, but when he tried to review the footage related to the incidents, the time Anna chipped her tooth, for instance, the files were always gone, corrupted during those very specific times. He hadn't said anything then, telling himself it might be a glitch, that he was just being paranoid. But after Linda's suspicions and the abrupt firing of Martha, their former housekeeper, after she questioned a bruise on Anna's wrist, he decided to act quietly. He had hidden 2 additional cameras, off the grid, not synced to the main system. Only he knew they existed. He made his way into his private study and gently placed Anna on the leather armchair beside the fireplace. She curled up, holding Charlie tightly to her chest. Her soaked cast thudded softly against the cushion. "Sweetheart, Daddy's got you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "No one's going to hurt you again." She didn't respond verbally, but her eyes shifted just enough to meet his gaze, and for the first time in months he saw a flicker of trust. That was when he truly knew. He logged into the private drive connected to the hidden cameras. He fast-forwarded to footage from 2 days prior, showing Candace yanking Anna's arm hard enough to make the little girl stumble. Last week, he saw Candace slamming a bowl onto the table and shouting into her silent face, "You think you're special just because you're broken, huh?" Last month, there was Candace, holding a glass of wine, kicking Charlie across the floor. "I'm sick of that damn bear." It was all there, all the missing pieces, all the things Marcus' gut had been screaming at him, but that his logic had stubbornly silenced. He watched the footage with stone-cold horror, his fists clenching so tightly that his knuckles turned white. This wasn't a woman under stress, this was calculated cruelty, and he had brought it into his daughter's life. His voice cracked as he whispered to Anna, "I should have seen it sooner." A soft breath escaped her lips. She didn't speak, but her fingers reached out and gently touched his hand. He reached for his phone and called Linda. "Come to the house," he said, his voice urgent. "Now, bring Raymond, too. I need legal advice, and I need my sister." "What happened?" Linda asked, her voice sharp with concern. She pushed Anna into the pool while her arm was in a cast. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Well, be there in 15 minutes, she said, her voice firm. As he hung up, Marcus stood and began pacing, his wet clothes still clinging to him uncomfortably. The world outside his mansion suddenly felt distant and unimportant. It wasn't about image or money or appearances anymore. It was about Anna, the daughter who had watched her mother die, the daughter who had swallowed her own voice just to survive, the daughter whose bruises weren't just on her skin, but deep within her silence. And now, he had proof. Tonight would be the last night Candace ever set foot in this house. He looked over at Anna again, still trembling slightly but watching him now, as if waiting for him. He walked over, sat beside her, and pulled her close. "We're going to be okay," he murmured, holding her tightly. "Daddy sees everything now, I promise. I see you." She pressed her head against his chest, and for a brief moment he felt it a breath. Steady and safe, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe it, too. The next morning arrived far too quickly, ushered in by a pale Arizona sunrise that painted the desert sky with soft gold hues. But Marcus Whitmore hadn't slept, not for a single second. He had sat by the edge of Anna's bed all night, his dress shirt still damp from the pool, his mind a churning mix of guilt, rage, and newfound awareness. Anna had eventually drifted off to sleep, her small body curled into a coma beneath the lavender comforter, still clutching Charlie. Her soaked cast had been carefully wrapped in towels, and had already called the pediatric clinic to schedule an emergency recast appointment for later that afternoon. But the real damage, the damage inside her, was so much harder to reach. Marcus stood slowly, carefully adjusting the blanket over her shoulders. For a moment, he simply watched her breathe. The doorbell rang. He moved quickly, careful not to wake her as he went to answer the front door. He glanced at the security monitor. Linda, his older sister, was standing there waiting, her purse slung over one shoulder, her lips tight with worry. Beside her stood Raymond Burns, a retired attorney, a Vietnam veteran, and a lifelong friend of the family. He opened the door. Linda stepped inside first and went straight for him. There was no hesitation, no greeting, just a sharp slap across his shoulder. "That's for letting this go on for months," she snapped, her voice filled with anger and disappointment. Marcus blinked, caught completely off guard. "I deserve worse," he said quietly. "You do," she agreed, her tone softening slightly. "Now, where's my niece?" "She's asleep," he said, gesturing toward her room. Raymond nodded curtly, his expression grim. "Let's talk," he said, his voice firm and no nonsense. They moved into the study. The air was heavy with the lingering scent of dark roast coffee and the thick weight of guilt. Marcus opened his laptop and turned the screen so they could see. "I installed hidden cameras after the others started glitching," he explained. His voice strained. "I didn't want to believe it, but I knew something wasn't right." He clicked the play button. The footage began to roll, snippets of Candace's cruelty woven together with brutal clarity. Each clip was time-stamped, each one more damning than the last. Linda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. Raymond didn't say a word. He simply clenched his jaw tighter and tighter with each passing minute. When the final clip ended, the one where Candace shoved Anna into the pool, Raymond finally spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "You need to file for emergency custody protection today," he said, his gaze intense. "And I mean now." "Him her biological father," Marcus said, his voice confused. "There's no custody battle." "There could be," Raymond said grimly, his expression unwavering. "Candace may not have any legal claim, but if she spins this to the media and claims emotional abuse or retaliation, you're in for a hellstorm. Public opinion matters when children are involved." Marcus exhaled heavily, running a hand through his hair. "Let her try," he said, his voice laced with defiance. "I've got enough here to sink her." Linda's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You know what hurts me the most?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "That little girl hasn't said a word in 2 years, and she still screamed the loudest without ever opening her mouth." Her words hit hard, landing like a physical blow. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of his failure pressing down on him. "I was building a life," he said, his voice barely a whisper, trying to keep it all afloat. "Running from grief." "I guess you didn't protect her," Linda said, her voice filled with a quiet sadness. "Not until now," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I know." She leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "So, what's the plan?" she asked, her voice firm. "I'll call my PR team later today," Marcus said, his mind racing. "We need to keep this quiet for now. I'll make sure Candace is served with the papers. She's not stepping foot in this house again." As if summoned by her name, Candace's voice suddenly rang out from upstairs. "Marcus!" He looked up, his eyes narrowing with anger. "Don't tell me she's still here," Linda whispered, her voice incredulous. "I let her sleep in the guest room," Marcus muttered, his voice tight. "I didn't want to make a scene in front of Anna." Footsteps echoed from above. Then Candace descended the stairs, dressed immaculately, as if the events of the previous night had been some unfortunate misunderstanding. Her hair was perfectly curled, her makeup flawless, her smile meticulously rehearsed. "Well," she said breezily, her voice light and artificial. "That was quite the overreaction last night, wasn't it?" "Sit down," Marcus said coldly, his voice devoid of any warmth. Candace's gaze flicked to Linda and Raymond, her smile faltering slightly. "What is this? An intervention?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Marcus didn't blink. "We have you on video," he said, his voice hard and unwavering. "All of it. You hurt my daughter. You yelled at her, pushed her, called her names. You thought you erased the footage, but I had backups." Candace's face paled visibly, but she recovered quickly, masking her shock with a forced air of indignation. "You're spying on me now?" she demanded, her voice rising in anger. "That's abuse, Marcus." Raymond chuckled dryly, a cynical glint in his eyes. "Lady, I've seen better liars in county jail," he said, his voice laced with disdain. "You won't get away with this," Candace hissed, her eyes flashing with anger. "I'll go public. Say you're unstable, that you fabricated it all. No jury will believe a mute little girl over me." Marcus' voice dropped an octave, becoming low and dangerous. "Try it," he said, his voice filled with a chilling certainty. There was something final in the way he said it, like a locked vault, a line irrevocably crossed. Candace hesitated, sensing the ground shifting precariously beneath her heels. "You're ending this just like that?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "No," Marcus said, his voice flat and unwavering. "You ended it the moment you laid your hands on my child." She stormed out of the room, her face a mask of fury. He didn't follow her. Raymond turned to Marcus, his expression grave. "Well, draw up the protective order this afternoon," he said, his voice firm. "I'll call a judge I trust." Marcus nodded, his heart heavy with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. An hour later, Candace's bags were packed. Linda watched silently from the doorway as Marcus walked her out of the house. There were no words exchanged, no apologies offered, just a long, lingering stare before the front door closed firmly behind her. For the last time, Anna had woken up by then. Her new cast was dry and securely wrapped. She sat quietly at the kitchen table, coloring in a sketchbook with one hand. Marcus crouched down beside her, his voice gentle. "She's gone, sweetheart," he said softly. "She won't come back." Anna continued coloring, seemingly unfazed. A few moments passed before she paused and turned the book slightly, revealing a picture Shed drawn. A tall man standing beside a little girl and Charlie. The man was holding her hand. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Is that us?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. She nodded once, her eyes fixed on the drawing. "That's a masterpiece," he said, forcing a smile, blinking rapidly to hold back tears. She picked up the red crayon and scribbled a heart above them, her small hand moving deliberately. She didn't need to speak. Shed said everything. Later that afternoon, Marcus sat in the waiting room of the pediatric orthopedic clinic, his legs bouncing anxiously as Anna sat silently beside him, her hand loosely holding his. She didn't look scared, not like the night before, but she didn't look relaxed either. Her little body was too still, her eyes too distant. A nurse peeked out from the swinging doors, her expression warm and professional. "Anna Whitmore?" she called out. Marcus stood up, his hand tightening around Anna's. "We're here," he said, his voice steady. Anna followed him without a word, her cast-covered arm held close to her chest. Inside the exam room, the technician greeted them warmly, but Marcus couldn't help noticing the way the man's eyes lingered on the faint bruising above the cast. The bruises were faint now, yellowed at the edges, but they were definitely there. "He'll let Dr. Garcia take a look before we recast," the technician said gently, before excusing himself and leaving the room. Marcus knelt beside Anna's chair, his voice soft and reassuring. "Sweetheart, you don't have to be afraid," he said, gently stroking her hair. "The doctor's just going to make sure your arm is healing, okay?" She didn't nod. She didn't even blink, but she squeezed Charlie tightly against her stomach and exhaled slowly, a small, almost imperceptible release of tension. He understood. It wasn't about the doctor. It wasn't even about the cast. It was about everything that had happened, everything she had endured. A few minutes later, Dr. Garcia, a tall woman in her 50s with streaks of silver in her dark hair, entered the room. Her demeanor was calm and respectful, but there was a sharpness to her presence, the quiet intensity of someone who had seen too much and forgotten nothing. She examined Anna's arm carefully, murmuring kind reassurances, asking her to make small movements, praising her for being brave. Anna remained quiet and obedient throughout the examination. Then, Dr. Garcia turned to Marcus, lowering her voice slightly, her gaze direct and unwavering. "This cast wasn't wrapped properly when it was first applied," she said, her voice firm. "The padding's uneven, and she's got some skin irritation here. And these?" She gently pointed to the faint bruises along Anna's forearm, her expression hardening slightly. "These didn't come from a fall," she stated, her voice filled with quiet certainty. Marcus felt his throat tighten, his chest constricting with a mixture of anger and grief. "I know, doctor," he said, his voice strained. Dr. Garcia nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting that response. "Do you have any documentation of what happened?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. "I do," he said, his voice firm. "Video, timestamps, and a witness. I've filed for emergency protection. The woman's out of the house." "Good," she said firmly, her voice filled with conviction. "Because this little girl, she smiles when you're not looking, and that tells me she still believes you're her safe place. Don't break that." Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of those words, feeling the immense responsibility settle upon his shoulders. It took about an hour to remove the soaked cast and replace it with a new one. Anna didn't flinch once, though her small fingers curled tightly around Charlie's leg, her only outward sign of distress. The entire time, she stared straight ahead, her lips pressed together in that familiar way that Marcus now recognized as her silent battle stance. As they exited the clinic, the sun felt warm again, Arizona's strange mercy after chaos, a fleeting moment of peace amidst the turmoil. Marcus opened the door to the Range Rover, helped Anna into the passenger seat, and buckled her seatbelt carefully, his movements deliberate and gentle. She still didn't say a word, but she didn't resist when he leaned over and kissed the top of her head, a silent gesture of love and reassurance. Back home, the house felt like a different place. Quieter, but not with the eerie quiet of fear. There was something calmer in the air, like the first breath you take after surfacing from deep water. Linda had stayed behind to tidy up while Marcus and Anna were at the clinic. Now, she stood at the kitchen island, sipping tea from a chipped mug that had once belonged to their mother. "She okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Marcus nodded slowly, hanging Anna's small backpack on the hook by the door. "Physically, yeah," he said, his voice tired. "Emotionally, she's a Whitmore," Linda said, her voice filled with a mixture of pride and sadness. "She'll carry the weight until someone shows her she doesn't have to." Anna wandered into the living room and climbed onto the couch with Charlie. The television was off, and she didn't ask for cartoons. She simply sat and stared at the fireplace as if trying to remember what it looked like when it was lit, lost in her own silent world. "I've got something to show you," Marcus said to Linda, motioning her to follow him into his study. He pulled up the footage again, the collection of hidden camera clips, this time focusing on the one from a week ago. In it, Candace was screaming at Anna for knocking over a glass of water. She towered over the child, spit flying from her mouth as she hissed. "I'm not your damn maid," she screamed, her voice filled with rage. "You think I owe you something just because your real mommy died?" Linda flinched, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "She said that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Multiple times," Marcus replied grimly, his voice filled with bitterness. "I missed all of it. I was out at investor meetings, flying to Boston for board approvals, trying to make us look like a perfect family from the outside, while she was breaking my daughter apart from the inside." Linda looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and pity. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice firm. "Raymond's preparing the protection order," Marcus said, his voice regaining some of its strength. "I already contacted the therapist Rachel used to trust, Dr. Elkins. He still runs his child trauma program. I've booked an intake session. Him selling the jet and work?" Linda asked, her eyebrows raised in surprise. Marcus laughed softly, bitterly. "I told my board I'm taking a leave of absence indefinitely," he said, his voice filled with resolve. Linda's eyebrows lifted even higher. "You, Mr. IPO, stepping down?" she asked, her voice incredulous. "I didn't step down," he said, his voice firm. "I stepped into fatherhood. For real, this time." Linda's face softened, and a genuine smile spread across her lips. "Took you long enough," she said, her voice filled with affection. They returned to the living room. Marcus sat beside Anna, who turned slightly toward him, just enough for her head to lean against his shoulder. He pulled out his phone and opened a photo one from years ago when Rachel was still alive. It was from a beach trip. Rachel was holding Anna upside down by her ankles, and both of them were laughing, their faces radiant with joy. He showed it to Anna. "You remember this?" he asked, his voice soft. Anna stared at the photo, her expression unreadable. Her mouth twitched slightly. The beginnings of something, a flicker of emotion. Then, she lifted the corner of Charlie's ear and touched the screen just once, gently, on Rachel's face. Marcus swallowed hard, his heart aching with grief and love. "You miss her?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. A small, almost imperceptible nod. "I do too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every day." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "You know what this is?" he asked, his voice gentle. Anna blinked, her eyes fixed on the box. He opened it. Inside was Rachel's necklace, a silver heart with a tiny ruby in the center. She had worn it every day for 5 years before she died. "I think you should have this," he whispered, his voice filled with love. "To remember her and to know she'd be so proud of you." Anna reached for it slowly, her hand trembling slightly. She closed the box, held it tightly against her chest, and for the first time in 2 years, she smiled, faint, fragile, but undeniably real. It was the beginning. Marcus leaned his head back against the couch and exhaled slowly, a wave of exhaustion and relief washing over him. The war wasn't over, but the silence had finally been broken. The sun dipped low behind the red rock ridges of Scottsdale as Marcus sat on the back patio, the evening air carrying that dry Arizona chill that arrived just after sundown. Anna was asleep upstairs, her new cast propped up on pillows, the box holding Rachel's necklace still tucked beneath her pillow. He hadn't wanted to leave her alone, but Linda had insisted he take a moment for himself. "Even soldiers need to retreat to breathe," Shed said, her voice firm. He wasn't sure he agreed, but he had come outside anyway. The patio lights cast a warm, amber glow. The backyard felt quieter now, but not with the hollow silence of fear. It was the kind of silence that came after noise, the aftermath of a storm, the quiet promise of healing. He leaned back in the chair, sipping slowly from a mug of black coffee that had long since gone cold. His phone buzzed. A message from Raymond. "Protective order confirmed," it read. "Candace has been served. No legal contact. Full police documentation underway." Marcus exhaled deeply, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. One more brick in the wall, one more safeguard in place. But paperwork couldn't fix what had been broken. Inside, the living room television flicked on. Linda was flipping through the local news channels. Marcus followed the light back into the house. "Did you see this?" she asked, nodding toward the screen. Candace's face filled the television screen. She was standing outside a downtown office building, crocodile tears streaming down her face, clutching a tissue with dramatic flair. Behind her, a banner read, "Whitmore Enterprises Community Gala. Canceled. I did everything for that child." Candace sobbed into the microphones, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "I stepped into a motherless home, gave her love, tried to help a grieving man, only to be thrown into a pool like trash. He's unstable, he's violent. That poor little girl," as using her as a pawn. Marcus didn't blink, his expression unwavering. "She's faster than I thought," he said, his voice calm. Linda crossed her arms, her expression grim. "We knew she'd strike back," she said, her voice laced with concern. "You're a billionaire. She's after your reputation now." The reporters swarmed Candace, who theatrically pulled away, claiming she feared for her life. A woman nearby asked if she had filed charges. Candace nodded solemnly, her eyes wide with feigned fear. "My lawyers are reviewing everything," she said, her voice trembling. "I won't stay silent." Marcus turned the television off, his jaw clenched. "She's bluffing," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "There's nothing she can prove that isn't a lie." "That's not the point," Linda said, her voice firm. "She doesn't need to prove anything. She just needs to plant doubt. Doubt sticks, especially with your name attached." Marcus looked at her, his expression resolute. "Then we shine a light on the truth," he said, his voice unwavering. Linda tilted her head, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and admiration. "What are you planning?" she asked, her voice curious. "Everything," he said, his voice filled with determination. Candace thought she was careful, but she forgot one thing. You can't erase what's been seen, especially when you're not the only one watching. He disappeared into his study and returned with a manila folder. Inside was a printed transcript of the hidden camera footage. Not just the clips, but full-time logs with accompanying voice recordings from the secondary mic head installed behind the fireplace mantel. Every curse, every insult, every threat, it was all there, lined up, annotated, and time-stamped. Linda flipped through it, her face hardening with each page. "You're giving this to the press?" she asked, her voice incredulous. "No," he said, his voice firm. "Not yet. I'm giving it to someone bigger." Linda looked up, her eyes questioning. 3 years ago, Marcus said, pacing slightly, his mind focused on the task ahead. Rachel helped fund a non-profit called Silent Hope. It's a foundation for mute and nonverbal children. They run a national awareness campaign, partner with PBS, and work with the Justice Department to help children testify in court without speaking. He paused, his voice filled with emotion. "She believed in it more than any investment I ever made," he said quietly. Linda raised an eyebrow, her expression thoughtful. "And they'll take Anna's story?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "They'll protect it," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "And they'll help tell it the right way, with dignity, with truth." That night, after making arrangements with the Foundation's legal team, Marcus sat at Anna's bedside again. She was curled up under the quilt Rachel's mother had made years ago, one corner clutched tightly in her fingers like a tether to something old and sacred. He spoke softly, unsure if she was even awake. "Do you remember the beach?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She stirred slightly, her breathing becoming a little less regular. "You found a seashell, remember? It was shaped like a heart. You said it was Mommy's gift from the ocean." Her lashes fluttered, and her eyes remained closed. "I still have it," he said, his voice gentle. "I kept it in my office. Want me to bring it to you?" She shifted slightly, her eyes blinking open barely. Then, for the first time in years, her lips parted. Not for sound, not for words, but to mouth something, a shape, a memory. He leaned in closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "What is it, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice filled with anticipation. Her mouth moved again, forming the shape of a word. "Shell," she mouthed, her expression focused. It was soundless, but it was clear. He froze, tears welling up in his eyes, his heart overflowing with a mixture of grief and joy. Then, tears slipping down his cheeks, he nodded slowly. "He'll go get it right now," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Downstairs, his hands trembled as he opened the small drawer in the back of his desk. The seashell sat exactly where he had left it. Pink, ridged, worn smooth by years of salt and time. He held it carefully, as if it might break. When he returned to Anna's room, she was still awake, her eyes watching him intently. He placed the seashell gently in her palm. She closed her fingers around it, her grip tightening slightly. And then, barely, he saw it again. A smile. But this time, he was looking right at it. It was there, and a new dawn was almost here. That night, as Anna drifted back to sleep, Marcus sat in the hallway outside her room, listening to her breathing. The night had grown quiet again, but this time, it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of peace, of hope, of healing. The quiet that came after her rescue was a balm to his soul, and somewhere deep down he made a vow. It wasn't just to keep her safe, but to guide her back to her own voice, even if that meant setting fire to the world that tried to silence her. The next morning, before the sun peeked over the horizon, Marcus was awakened by the faint sound of little feet padding down the hallway just outside his bedroom. He held his breath, listening. The footsteps were light, tentative, but steady. It was Anna. He eased out of bed and stepped into the hall. Catching sight of her tiny figure by the front window, bundled in her fuzzy unicorn pajamas. Her arm, still encased in a fresh cast, rested lightly against the glass. Outside, the desert sky was just starting to lighten, the deep purples giving way to gentle shades of pink and gold. "Morning, sweetheart," he said softly, crouching down beside her. She didn't jump or flinch. She turned her head just a little and looked up at him with her familiar, steady gaze. Then, without him prompting, she lifted her hand and tapped the glass once. He followed her line of sight. In the driveway sat Linda's dusty red truck, its bed piled high with boxes. Anna cocked her head, looking at him, a question forming in her eyes. "She's helping set up the community house this week," he explained. "Remember I told you about the new reading room? She's moving all her old books there." Anna blinked, processing the information. Then she turned back to the window. "Shall be back this evening," Marcus added, then paused, hesitating. "Do you want to help her today?" The thought of bringing Anna into a public space still made him uneasy. Was it too soon? Would it be too much for her? But something in her expression, maybe curiosity, made him ask anyway. She didn't nod, but she didn't look away either. That was enough for him. By mid-morning, they had arrived at the community center, an adobe-style building nestled between a church and an old diner where Marcus used to hang out when he was a kid. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for Linda's truck and a couple of volunteers lugging boxes. Linda waved them over. "You're early." "She was up before I was," Marcus said, helping Anna out of the car. "I think she wanted to see what you're building." "Perfect," Linda grinned. "I could use a good critic." Inside, the center smelled of old books and lemon cleaner. Warm light streamed in through the tall windows. Linda led them into the reading room, which was still a work in progress, with walls half-painted and bookshelves in the middle of being assembled. A few folding chairs were arranged in a corner next to a donated piano and a jumbled stack of storybooks. Anna wandered over to one of the low shelves, running her fingers along the spines of the worn picture books. She picked up Goodnight Moon, sat cross-legged on the floor, and opened it with a sense of reverence. "She used to love that one," Marcus murmured. "She still does," Linda said. "I've seen her read it to Charlie when she thinks no one's watching." Marcus smiled faintly. An hour went by. Volunteers came and went. Linda organized shelves. Marcus helped put together a bench. Anna stayed by the books, silently turning pages, occasionally pressing her cast against her cheek when she got tired. Then something happened. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, walked in holding his grandmother's hand. He had a juice box in one hand and a toy dinosaur in the other. He noticed Anna right away. "Hi," he said, without a hint of shyness. He plopped down beside her, holding up the dinosaur. "This is Rex. Has fast. Want to see?" Anna glanced at Marcus, who nodded gently. She looked back at the boy. He roared and zoomed the toy around her book. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then Anna reached into her backpack and pulled out Charlie. She held him up. The boy grinned. "That's a bear," she nodded. The boy roared again. "He fights Rex." To Marcus' amazement, Anna tilted Charlie forward just a little, as if he were getting ready to pounce. The boy gasped. "Whoa, your bear's brave." And then it happened. A sound, small, airy, barely audible. A giggle. Marcus froze in his tracks. Linda looked up from her stack of books, her mouth dropping open in surprise. Anna giggled again. It was light, like the gentle tinkling of wind chimes, but it was real. She covered her mouth as if she was surprised by herself. The boy just laughed and made Rex spin in circles. Marcus crouched down nearby, careful not to intrude. Anna turned to him, her eyes wide. He smiled and mouthed, "That was beautiful." She blushed and looked down. He didn't cry, not in front of her, but something deep inside him cracked open, like dry earth when rain finally falls after a long drought. Later that afternoon, as the volunteers were packing up, Linda walked over and handed Marcus a folded sheet of paper. It was from one of the center's counselors, a list of therapists who specialized in selective mutism, trauma-related silence, and child behavioral recovery. "She doesn't need to be fixed," Linda said quietly, "but she might need help finding her way back." Marcus nodded. "I want to give her every chance." He paused. She giggled. "I know," Linda whispered, her voice trembling. On the drive home, Anna fell asleep in the back seat, Charlie resting beside her. The sun dipped low behind the mountains, casting an orange glow across the dashboard. Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Her lips were curved in a small, lingering smile. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, more determined than ever. There would be more headlines, more attacks. Candace wasn't finished. The world had a way of trying to crush people who couldn't speak up for themselves. But now Marcus had a purpose, not just to protect Anna, but to amplify her silence. To make the world hear what she didn't yet have the words to say. And today, for the first time, Shed answered back with the first sound Shed made in 2 years. The next morning, Marcus was jolted awake by his phone vibrating insistently on the nightstand. The sun hadn't yet broken through the curtains, and the house was still wrapped in the soft hush of early dawn. He blinked away the sleepiness and checked the screen. 2 missed calls from Raymond. 1 voicemail, 1 text. "Turn on the news, Channel 7 now." Marcus sat upright, his heart already bracing for the worst. He slipped on a hoodie and padded barefoot into the kitchen, keeping one ear tuned toward the hallway where Anna was still sleeping. He turned on the television. The headline hit him like a punch to the gut. Candace Jordan files defamation suit against Marcus Whitmore, claims smear campaign against her is fake. Video played on repeat of Candace leaving the Maricopa County Courthouse in designer sunglasses and a pale blue pantsuit, walking like a wronged woman straight out of a courtroom drama. "I love that child," she said to a swarm of microphones. "I was the only mother she had." Marcus Whitmore is manipulating the press, forging footage, and weaponizing a traumatized little girl for personal gain. It's disgusting, and it's dangerous. Marcus stood frozen. The anchorwoman's voice cut back in. Candace Jordan's legal team is requesting an emergency hearing to prevent the release of what they call illegally obtained surveillance footage from inside the Whitmore residence. He switched off the screen and dialed Raymond. "She's pushing hard," Marcus said the moment the call connected. "She's got a PR firm now," Raymond replied. "Big one. She's framing this like a classic case of a powerful man silencing a woman, painting herself as the victim." Marcus clenched his jaw. She was never a victim. "I believe you," Raymond said. "The court might too. But if her lawyers get ahead of us, they'll spin this as you exploiting a mute child to avoid accountability." Marcus glanced at the hallway again, lowering his voice. "She isn't mute anymore." Raymond paused. "What?" She giggled. "Yesterday, in public, with another kid." She smiled. She's coming back, Ray?" Raymond's voice softened. "That's incredible, but it also makes things riskier. I know. Every move we make has to be clean, timed perfectly. We file a countersuit by Friday. Emotional distress, child endangerment, malicious defamation. Ill drafted. But Marcus, you need to go public before she does again. You want me to give an interview?" "Not just an interview," Raymond said. "A statement. On your terms, you control the narrative. You release the real footage. You speak directly to the people who followed your work for decades." Marcus didn't answer right away. His instinct had always been privacy. Head protected his company, his family, his grief with silence. But now, silence had become the weapon used against them. He looked toward the hallway again. "All right, I'll do it," he said. 3 hours later, Marcus sat in front of the grand piano in his study. A small camera crew from the Silent Hope Foundation had set up discreetly, with 2 softbox lights and a single lapel mic clipped to his collar. The crew remained silent. The foundation's media director, a composed woman in her 60s named Terry Wexler, stood off camera with her hands folded. "Whenever you're ready, Mr. Whitmore," she said. He looked at the lens. Then he looked beyond it, imagining his audience. Shareholders, colleagues, people in Arizona and beyond who saw the headlines but never the truth. He began, "My name is Marcus Whitmore. I'm a father, a widower, and am here to tell you what really happened inside my home." His voice didn't waver. He described Rachel's death, Anna's silence, the way Candace slowly inserted herself into their lives, her charm, her subtle manipulation, her private cruelty. He explained how Anna's injuries kept piling up, how the main security system mysteriously failed until he installed hidden cameras and learned the truth. "I didn't want to believe it," he said. because that would mean I'd failed my daughter. And I did. He took a long breath. But I'm here now, and am not backing down. My daughter is the strongest person I know, and she's finally beginning to heal. He ended the recording with a sentence that came to him without planning. They always go after the quiet ones, because they think no one will speak for them. Well, I'm speaking. Terry nodded. Well, cut this clean, add subtitles, and release it on all platforms within 24 hours. Marcus stood up, his hands shaking slightly. Thank you. That evening, after the crew had left and the sun was setting, he and Anna sat on the back patio. She wore a soft knit hat, even though it was warm. Something about it seemed to make her feel safe. They watched the sky turn orange. He said, I told the world what happened. Anna looked up at him. I told them about your strength, about how brave you've been. She didn't respond, but after a moment, she took his hand and rested her head against his shoulder. And then, quietly, she whispered, almost inaudibly, Did they believe you? Marcus turned to her, his heart pounding. Her voice was soft, barely there, but it was there. Yes, he whispered, emotion welling up in his throat. They will, because the truth always finds its way. Anna looked at the sky again. I think Mommy would be proud. Tears filled his eyes. He didn't try to hide them. He looked at his daughter, at the quiet strength she carried in every breath, every small word, every silent scream shed endured alone. And in that moment, Marcus knew Candace had tried to break the wrong little girl, because Anna, though silent, was unbreakable. And now the world would hear her roar. By morning, the video had reached nearly 3 million views. It began slowly, shared first by the Silent Hope Foundation's network of trauma recovery advocates, then picked up by parenting forums, legal blogs, and finally the national media. Within 12 hours, Marcus Whitmore's face was on every screen from New York to Los Angeles, not as the untouchable tech mogul, but as a father who had failed, admitted it, and fought like hell to make it right. Candace's narrative started to crumble by lunchtime. Marcus sat in the kitchen, his laptop open to a flood of notifications. He didn't care about the press headlines or the corporate emails. What mattered were the comments. Him a survivor of childhood abuse. This man just said everything my father never did. My daughter hasn't spoken in over a year. Watching this made me believe she might again. This is how you protect your child, not with lawyers, but with the truth. Linda walked into the kitchen, coffee in hand, her face pale from scrolling through her phone. You're everywhere, Marcus. CNN, NPR. Even Oprah's team retweeted the clip. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Oprah? Linda nodded. The Oprah. He let out a dry chuckle, but the smile faded quickly. And Candace? Linda pulled up a tablet. Well, the footage is out now, and not just your video. Terry's team added one of the hidden cam clips, edited for sensitivity. But it's enough. Candace shoving Anna near the stairwell, yelling at her for dropping a glass, blaming her for ruining the mood. People saw it. Good. They also found her old interviews. You know, the influencer stuff she did in LA before she came here. It's not flattering. It's all wine brand deals and manifestation rants. Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The world was watching. And now it sees. Linda hesitated, then added, Candace's attorney filed a motion to delay the defamation hearing. No comment from her team since last night. It should have felt like a victory, but Marcus couldn't shake the unease simmering beneath the surface. Anna was in the next room, in the reading nook Linda had built for her, flipping through a pop-up book. The light from the window bathed her face in soft gold. She hadn't said another word since last night, but she smiled. She laughed quietly, and when she looked at him, her eyes no longer held that haunted stillness. Still, Marcus knew what was coming next wasn't over. It was just beginning. I want to talk to Dr. Elkins again, he said. Linda nodded. You thinking therapy now? I'm thinking testimony, he replied. When the custody hearing happens, or worse, if Candace escalates, Anna might have to share her story. I want her to have every support she needs to do that, if she chooses to. Linda's eyes softened. You're not pushing her too fast, are you? It'd never make her speak, Marcus said. But it'll make sure the door's open when she decides to. That afternoon, Marcus drove Anna to the Silent Hope Center downtown. It was quieter than he expected. No press at the gates, no cameras, just the quiet hum of a protected place where children could exist without being watched or judged. Dr. Elkins met them in the foyer, a tall man with silver hair and a deep voice like thunder wrapped in velvet. He knelt to greet Anna at eye level. "Hello, Anna. I'm Richard. You can call me Doctor. E, if you like." Anna looked at him curiously. Then, slowly, she reached into her backpack and pulled out Charlie. She held him forward as if to say, "He goes where I go." Dr. Elkins smiled. "Well, then Charlie's invited too." Marcus stayed in the observation room behind the mirrored glass, his heart pounding as Anna walked into the softly lit therapy room, Charlie in tow. The room was full of warm textures, plush rugs, bean bags, a low table with finger paints, sand trays, and tiny animal figurines. Anna moved slowly through the space. Dr. Elkins gave her time. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even speak at first. He simply built a tower out of blocks. After a while, Anna joined him. Block by block, their silence became a connection. Marcus watched every second. He didn't expect miracles. He didn't want them. He just wanted Anna to feel safe, seen, and maybe eventually strong enough to speak her own truth. When the session ended, Dr. Elkins walked Marcus to his office. "She's bright," he said. "Incredibly observant. Trusts you deeply." Marcus nodded. "She doesn't say much?" "She doesn't need to," Elkins replied. "She speaks in patterns, in presence. But when she does speak again fully, it'll be because she's ready to own the story, not just remember it." "I want to help her get there," Marcus said. But terrified ill pushed too hard. "You're already helping her," Elkins said gently, by letting her take the lead. They returned home as the sky turned dusky. Anna was quiet in the back seat again, but this time she was humming a soft, tuneless little melody that sounded like sunlight might if it had a voice. As Marcus pulled into the driveway, his phone buzzed again. "It was Raymond," he answered quickly. "Bad news," Raymond said without preamble. "Candace's lawyers just requested emergency visitation rights. She's claiming you've alienated Anna emotionally, that the viral footage proves she's being manipulated into silence." Marcus gripped the steering wheel. "Unbelievable." "They're desperate," Raymond said, "but the court granted a hearing 3 days from now." Marcus looked in the rearview mirror. Anna had fallen asleep, Charlie hugged tight to her chest. "They won't get near her," he said, his voice cold. "I'll prepare the restraining evidence," Raymond replied. "But you need to be ready. They're going to drag your name and hers through every piece of mud they can find." Marcus stared at the fading light beyond the windshield. "Let them try," he whispered. "I'm done staying quiet." 3 days. That was all the time Marcus had to prepare for the emergency hearing. 72 hours to protect Anna from being dragged into a courtroom circus, manipulated by a woman who had already stolen too much from her. Every minute felt like a sprint. The morning of the hearing, Marcus woke before dawn. The desert sky was still a dark blue, the horizon tinged with a thin band of light like a promise. He moved quietly through the house, checking on Anna first. She slept peacefully, curled into a crescent beneath her quilt, Charlie tucked under one arm. The box with Rachel's necklace still rested near her pillow. It hadn't left her side. In the kitchen, Linda had already brewed a pot of strong coffee. She looked up as Marcus entered. "You didn't sleep, did you?" she asked. He shook his head and poured a mug. "Too much to prepare." "Raymond just texted," she said, sliding her phone across the counter. Candace switched attorneys, hired someone new, a shark. Marcus picked up the phone. The name made his stomach clench. Daniel Fallner, a media-savvy trial lawyer known for turning courtroom strategy into spectacle. He didn't just fight cases. He performed them. She's planning to turn this into a public trial, Marcus muttered. Not just about custody. She wants the spotlight back. Linda nodded. She can't stand being seen as the villain. She is the villain, Marcus said flatly. And today, the court needs to see that too. They arrived at the courthouse 2 hours early. Raymond met them at the entrance, dressed impeccably in a navy suit. His briefcase in one hand, documents in the other. She's already here, he said, waiting inside with Volner. Marcus glanced back at the SUV where Anna sat in the back seat, coloring quietly. Linda had stayed with her, keeping her calm, keeping the world out. She's not going in there, Marcus said. Not unless the judge absolutely demands it. Raymond nodded. Well, fight that. They entered the courtroom at 8:57 a.m. Sharp. The space was sterile, modern, with high ceilings and cold gray walls. At the far end, Candace sat poised beside her new lawyer, dressed in soft lavender, a color that screamed harmless and gentle. But Marcus had seen the venom behind her eyes. She didn't look at him, but she smirked at the cameras stationed just outside the courtroom doors. She knew this would get out. The judge, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, entered. This is a hearing to determine whether emergency visitation rights shall be granted to Miss Candace Jordan. Let's proceed. Volner was the first to speak. He was smooth, charismatic, and terrifyingly good at weaving fiction into fact. Your Honor, he began, my client has been subjected to an unrelenting campaign of defamation. Not only has she been publicly humiliated, but she's also been cut off from a child she's raised as her own, a child she loves. We're requesting temporary supervised visitation to maintain the emotional bond that's already been severely damaged. Raymond stood. Your Honor, we reject this entirely. Miss Jordan is under investigation for child endangerment. There is surveillance footage admitted to this court that clearly shows her physically and emotionally abusing the child in question. She was removed from the home for that reason. Volner raised a hand. The footage, Your Honor, was illegally obtained without proper disclosure or consent. It's inadmissible and subject to privacy violations. We're not seeking a criminal conviction here. Raymond shot back. This is a custody hearing. The child's safety is paramount. Admissibility rules are different, and besides, the court has already viewed the footage and deemed it relevant. The judge held up a hand. Enough. I've reviewed the evidence. I've seen the recordings, and I've read both sides of the affidavit. She looked at Volner. This footage was gathered in the child's home by her legal guardian. Your privacy argument doesn't hold. Candace shifted in her seat, her calm demeanor cracking. Raymond stepped forward. Your Honor, we've also submitted a sealed statement from Dr. Richard Elkins, child trauma specialist at the Silent Hope Center. His report confirms that the child, Anna Whitmore, exhibited symptoms consistent with chronic emotional trauma during the time she lived with Miss Jordan. Since Miss Jordan's removal, the child has begun to recover. The judge nodded slowly. I've read Dr. Elkins' report. It is compelling. Then her gaze shifted to Marcus. Mr. Whitmore, I'd like to hear from you directly. Why do you believe your daughter should not see Miss Jordan, even under supervision? Marcus stood. He hadn't written a speech. He didn't need one. She's afraid of her, he said simply. Anna may not say it out loud. She's only just beginning to find her voice again, but I see it in her eyes. I see it when someone knocks too loud, or drops a plate, or raises their voice. I failed her once. I let that woman into our home. I ignored the signs. I will never do that again. He paused. My daughter deserves to heal in peace. She deserves to know she's safe, and Candace Jordan took that from her. The room was silent for a long moment. The judge finally leaned forward. This court finds that granting emergency visitation is not in the best interest of the child. The motion is denied. Miss Jordan is ordered to maintain a distance of no less than 500 feet from the child until further notice. Candace stood abruptly, her face pale with rage. This is a farce? You're letting him turn the world against me. Volner tried to calm her, but she shook him off and stormed out of the courtroom, cameras flashing as she passed through the corridor. Marcus exhaled, his hands trembling slightly as he returned to the bench. Raymond leaned in. That was the first battle. We won. Back outside, Marcus opened the car door. Anna looked up at him. Is she gone? He nodded. She's not going to hurt you. Again. Anna didn't smile. But she nodded once firmly, then reached for his hand. And as the SUV pulled away from the courthouse, the world behind them still buzzing with headlines and whispers, Marcus realized something. Candace had raised her voice in court, but Anna's silence had spoken louder. The day after the hearing, the Whitmore house was quieter than it had been in weeks, not the fragile quiet of anxiety or grief, but a kind of peace that felt hard-earned. The storm had passed, at least for now. And in its wake, Anna smiled more often. She didn't speak again that day, but she did hum a soft tune while drawing sunflowers with bright yellow crayons. And for Marcus, that was enough. He sat across from her at the kitchen island, scrolling through his emails. Messages poured in from people all over the country. Survivors, parents, even former employees he hadn't spoken to in years. One message stood out. Subject: She tried this before. From Anonymous Message. Marcus, I saw the footage. I worked with Candace years ago. Different state, different name. She had a relationship with a man who had a son. Same story. Things got bad. Then, the man suddenly lost custody and no one could prove why. Be careful. She knows how to hide the damage. Marcus' blood chilled. He reread it 3 times, then forwarded it to Raymond with a note. Verify discreetly. Linda entered from the garden with a basket of fresh herbs, her sleeves rolled up. She's asking to plant a flower bed, she said, nodding toward Anna. Wants sunflowers and lavender. Thought it might be nice to have something that grows under her name. Marcus looked over at Anna, who had begun sketching rows of stems in the margin of her notebook. She never liked flowers before, he said. She's growing, Linda replied. You both are. Later that evening, Marcus took Anna to the backyard. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, golden shadows across the gravel paths. Anna carried a small trowel and a packet of sunflower seeds. She knelt in the soft dirt near the back wall, while Marcus dug small holes for planting. She pressed the seeds in gently, like she was laying down hope. As they worked, Marcus spoke softly, mostly to fill the space. Your mom loved sunflowers. She used to say they were the only flowers that smiled back at you. Anna paused, her hands dirt-stained, then turned her face toward him. Her expression held something thoughtful, almost longing. He continued. When she was pregnant with you, she used to sit right here in this spot and talk to you every afternoon, told you stories, sang silly songs. Anna blinked slowly. A quiet breeze stirred the dirt around her ankles. Then, carefully, she lifted her casted arm and pressed it against his hand. A silent thank you, a connection. That night, as Marcus tucked her into bed, she reached beneath her pillow and pulled out the box with Rachel's necklace. She opened it, took the chain in her small fingers, and held it out to him. You want me to? He asked. She nodded. He placed the necklace gently around her neck. The tiny gold pendant, a sunburst, rested just above her collarbone. Mom would be proud of you, he said softly. She reached for Charlie and pulled him close. Her eyes remained open for a long time as he turned off the light and stepped into the hallway. Marcus didn't go far. He sat in the dark just outside her room, elbows on his knees, fingers steepled. His mind still churned with the anonymous email. What if Candace had done this before? What if Shed slipped through the cracks more than once, leaving a trail of broken children behind her? His phone buzzed again. A message from Raymond. Working on the lead, found a match. 2017, Colorado Springs. Man named Darren Holt. Will call you in the morning. Marcus stood abruptly. He couldn't wait until morning. He walked out to the patio, dialed the number Raymond had attached to the case file. It rang 4 times before a gruff male voice answered. Yeah, Holt here. Who is this? My name is Marcus Whitmore. You don't know me, but I believe you once knew a woman named Candace Jordan, though she may have gone by another name. Then there was a long silence. You have a kid? Marcus' stomach turned. Yes, a daughter. Another pause. She hurt mine, broke his arm, said he fell. Police didn't believe us. Her lawyer made us look crazy. I lost custody during the fight. I haven't seen my son in 5 years. Marcus felt a surge of nausea. I'm sorry. She's dangerous, man, and she doesn't stop until you're flat on your back and she's walking away clean. Would you be willing to speak on record? Submit a statement? There was hesitation. If it helps you keep your girl safe. Yeah, he'll talk. Just tell me when. Marcus ended the call with shaking hands. He sat outside until well past midnight, staring up at the stars. For every answer, 10 more questions rose. But one thing was clear. Candace had done this before, and she would do it again unless someone stopped her. The next morning, Marcus gathered every piece of evidence they had. Raymond would present Holt's statement alongside the hidden footage, Elkin's report, and the family history that now stretched across 2 states. They would file a permanent protection order with criminal charges attached. But it wasn't just about Candace anymore. It was about the system that let her walk away. He stood in Anna's doorway just before breakfast. She was braiding ribbons into Charlie's arm. A new ritual shed started recently. When she saw him, she patted the bed beside her. Hey, he said gently. I need to ask you something. It's important. She tilted her head. There may come a day when you'll be asked to tell your story. You don't have to say anything. You don't owe anyone that, but if you want to, it'll be right there. Anna looked down at the bear. Then she did something he hadn't expected. She pulled a small notebook from beneath her pillow and handed it to him. Inside were sketches, simple ones. Her, Candace, him, a broken glass, a staircase, a bruise, a tear, a sunflower, and at the bottom of the last page, she had written a single word, enough. Marcus closed the notebook, eyes burning. Yes, sweetheart, he said, and he held her, knowing this was just the beginning of everything they still needed to say. The courthouse was quieter this time. There were no swarms of reporters, no flashing cameras, no microphones being shoved into faces, just a handful of courtroom staff, a judge with tired eyes, and a quiet tension that hung in the air like fog. But for Marcus, this hearing was heavier than all the others combined. This was the day he had both feared and prepared for. Anna had chosen to speak. He had left that decision entirely in her hands. There was no pressure, no expectation. But the moment she handed him that notebook with the word enough written in her careful, unsteady hand, he knew she was ready. And now, as they sat side by side outside the courtroom, her small hand wrapped tightly around his index finger, he could feel the weight of her courage like a pulse beneath her skin. Linda knelt before Anna, adjusting the little cardigan draped over her shoulders. "You're brave," she whispered. "Not because of what you're going to say, but because you're willing to say it." Anna looked up at her, eyes wide and calm. Then she nodded once. Raymond emerged from the courtroom and gave Marcus a subtle nod. "They're ready." Judge agreed to a closed session. No press, just the lawyers, the child advocate, and the court reporter. "Thank God," Marcus said, exhaling. "She wants to bring Charlie," Raymond added. "Of course," Marcus replied. Anna clutched her stuffed bear to her chest as they entered the courtroom. The space felt colder than the last time, maybe because Marcus knew that this was no longer about defense. This was Anna stepping into the spotlight, if only for a moment, to tell a truth she had carried in silence for far too long. The judge greeted Anna gently. "Good morning, sweetheart. You can sit wherever you like, and you don't have to say anything you don't want to. This is your space." Anna sat in the oversized chair beside the child advocate. Charlie perched on her lap like a silent bodyguard. She didn't speak at first. Her fingers fidgeted with the bear's ribbon. Then the judge said something unexpected. Before we begin, I want you to know something. I read the letters you wrote, I saw your drawings. They spoke volumes. You've already told your story, the judge said. Anything else you say now is just adding light. Anna blinked, then reached into the small pouch she wore across her chest. She pulled out the same notebook from earlier, the one filled with sketches. She opened it to the page with the sunflower. She held it up. "This is me," she said quietly. The room fell completely still. The judge leaned forward gently. "Can you tell us why?" Anna swallowed, then spoke again just loud enough to be heard. "Because sunflowers grow toward the light, even when the sky is heavy." Marcus felt the tears sting his eyes. He kept his posture straight, steady, but inside he was crumbling with awe. "Did someone hurt you, Anna?" the judge asked softly. Anna nodded. She said Mommy was gone, so I had to listen to her even when it hurt. "Who said that to you, Candace?" The room seemed to constrict around them. Anna didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She clutched Charlie, took a breath, and continued. "She pushed me. She pulled me. She told me I was hard to love, but I tried. I tried really hard to be good." "You didn't do anything wrong, Anna," the judge said gently. "What she did to you was wrong. You didn't deserve that." Anna looked down, lips pressed together. Then she added, "Daddy saved me, but I didn't know if I was allowed to be happy again." Marcus lowered his head, letting the tears fall in silence. The judge turned to the court reporter. "Enter all verbal testimony into permanent record." Then she looked back at Anna. "You are very brave. Thank you for helping us understand." Anna looked at Marcus, and for the first time, she smiled in the courtroom. A small, steady smile that said, "I said it. I made it real." The judge addressed both legal teams. Based on the cumulative evidence, including the sealed affidavit from Dr. Elkins, video surveillance, and the child's own testimony, this court is issuing a permanent no-contact order between Candace Jordan and the minor, Anna Whitmore. There were no objections. Faulkner, Candace's lawyer, sat silent, his argument dead before it began. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am referring Miss Jordan's conduct to the county prosecutor's office for review of potential criminal charges. This court will not tolerate any manipulation of a child's trust under the guise of guardianship." The gavel came down. The hearing was over. Marcus didn't wait for formalities. He crossed the room, knelt beside Anna, and held her tightly. She buried her face into his neck and whispered, "Is it really done?" "It's done," he whispered back. "You did it." Outside, the sky was wide and blue, dotted with lazy white clouds. Anna twirled in the sunlight with Charlie in her arms, the necklace around her neck catching the light. Linda opened the passenger door and called, "Snack, stop before home." Anna turned to Marcus. "Can I get waffles?" He grinned. "Waffles it is." They drove to a little diner on the outskirts of town, the kind with faded leather booths and a jukebox that still worked. Anna sat between Marcus and Linda, dipping waffles into syrup and humming a tune under her breath. Every now and then, she reached out and touched Marcus' sleeve as if to make sure he was still there. He always would be. As they waited for the check, an older couple approached their table. The woman leaned down slightly. "Excuse me," she said. "I hope we're not intruding. We just saw your video, and we wanted to say thank you for what you did, for standing up for her." Marcus nodded politely, unsure what to say. But then Anna, without prompting, looked up at them and said clearly, "I stood up too." The woman's eyes widened. Her husband smiled. "Yes, you did, sweetheart, and we heard you loud and clear." After they left, Marcus looked at his daughter. "You ready to go home?" She nodded, then added, "Can we plant more sunflowers? As many as you want." And as they walked out into the warm Arizona afternoon, hand in hand, he realized something profound. Anna hadn't just survived. She hadn't just spoken. She had planted something, and now the whole world would watch it bloom. 1 week after the final court ruling, Marcus thought the worst was behind them. Anna had returned to a gentle rhythm, mornings spent drawing on the patio, Afternoons at the Silent Hope Center with Dr. Elkins, evenings curled up beside Marcus reading picture books she used to be too scared to open. Her voice, though still soft and infrequent, had returned like a timid guest who no longer feared being silenced. But peace, Marcus had learned, was fragile, especially when your past refuses to stay buried. It started with a phone call at 6:42 a.m. Raymond's voice was sharp. "She's appealing the no-contact order." Marcus sat upright in bed, his chest tightening. "On what grounds?" "She's claiming she was coerced, that the footage was staged. Her new legal team is arguing it was a high-tech smear campaign designed to weaponize public sympathy and gain full custody. They're leaning into your tech background, saying you manipulated evidence." Marcus stood, pacing the floor barefoot. "That's insane. We have the original files, the metadata, the timestamps. They know that. But that's not their goal, Marcus. They're not trying to win the appeal. They're trying to create doubt. If they can muddy the water just enough, they can stall any future criminal charges." Marcus stopped pacing. "Stall for what?" "I don't know," Raymond admitted, "but this isn't over." By midday, Marcus was back in his office, going through security logs. Every file, every backup, every clip that had documented the abuse Candace inflicted. He wanted to be sure there were no gaps, no room for misinterpretation, but something was off. In one of the folders, specifically the one from the hidden camera in the laundry room, 3 video files were missing. Just gone, not corrupted, not deleted, erased cleanly. Marcus' pulse quickened. He hadn't touched that folder since the footage had been turned over to Raymond. No one should have had access. He double-checked the server logs, one remote access, 4 nights ago, an IP address masked with a VPN. The breach had lasted only 9 minutes, just enough time to target specific files. He called Raymond again. "We've been compromised." There was silence on the line. "How bad?" "Targeted deletion, precision work. Someone got in and took only what could weaken the case against her." Raymond cursed under his breath. "She's got help. Someone with serious resources." "She always did," Marcus muttered. Marcus called in his lead cybersecurity officer, a quiet veteran named Morgan, who had once worked in digital forensics for the FBI. Within an hour, Morgan confirmed what Marcus feared. It had been a sophisticated breach, not random, not sloppy. "They used a piggyback route through your satellite server," Morgan explained. "Encrypted access. This wasn't a kid in a basement. This was surgical." "Can you retrieve the missing files?" Marcus asked. Morgan hesitated. "I can try, but it'll need time and a court order to dig deeper into any third-party access, especially if this turns criminal." Marcus nodded. "Get it started quietly." Later that night, Marcus sat in Anna's room after she fell asleep. The glow of her nightlight cast soft stars on the ceiling. Charlie lay next to her, one arm loosely wrapped around her neck. She looked peaceful, untouched by the storm rebuilding around them. He watched her sleep, guilt gnawing at his chest. He had thought they'd made it through. Head promised her peace, and now that peace was being chipped away by lawyers, loopholes, and lies. The next morning, the first article hit the internet. Was the Whitmore abuse case manufactured? Inside the allegations against tech mogul Marcus Whitmore. It came from an obscure fringe outlet, but it was loud, confident, and loaded with half-truths. It suggested that Marcus had faked the abuse for sympathy, for control, for attention, that perhaps Anna's silence wasn't trauma but coaching. It didn't go viral, not immediately, but Marcus knew how disinformation worked. You didn't need to shout, you only needed to whisper into the right ears. He called Linda into his office. She read the article with a deep frown. "They're painting you as paranoid," she said, "as a grieving husband who can't let go." Marcus' jaw clenched. "That's the angle. Make me look like the unstable one, frame Anna as an unreliable narrator. She's 6, Linda said flatly, and she's already been through hell." Marcus turned to the window, watching the sun rise over the desert ridge, and now they're trying to throw her back into it. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived at the house. Raymond opened it first and scanned the contents with a grim expression. She's demanding visitation again through a supervised third party. Claims she only wants to restore a sense of closure for Anna. Says she's owed one final goodbye. Marcus stared at the paper. Over my dead body. Raymond placed the letter down. We can block it, but we need to go on the offensive now full press. We file a preemptive civil suit for damages, public endangerment, emotional distress, everything. Drag her team into court before they can drag us. Marcus didn't hesitate. Do it. That night after dinner, Marcus found Anna in the garden. She had planted her sunflower bed with precision, each one spaced perfectly apart, their stems beginning to reach for the sky. He sat beside her, watching her trace her fingers in the soil. "Do you remember?" she asked softly. "When I used to not talk?" He looked at her gently. "I do." She nodded. "I remember what it felt like there were bees in my throat, loud ones, angry." Marcus swallowed. "Are they still there?" Anna shook her head. "Not when I'm with you." He placed his hand over hers. "They're trying to change the story, sweetheart, to say things that aren't true, but we're going to make sure the real story stays heard loud and clear." Anna looked at him, then stood and went inside. A moment later, she returned with her notebook. She opened it to a new page and drew something simple. A bear holding a sunflower. Below it, she wrote 2 words in block letters. "Tell everything." Marcus smiled. That's exactly what we'll do. And as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, casting a warm amber over the desert, father and daughter sat side by side in the dirt, planning not just how to survive the next storm, but how to expose it. Marcus Whitmore was not a man who enjoyed the spotlight. He had built his empire from code and circuitry, not charisma. But this time, stepping forward wasn't about business or pride. It was about truth. The morning after Anna handed him her drawing labeled, "Tell Everything," Marcus made a decision. If Candace wanted to manipulate public opinion, twist narratives, and hide behind legal theatrics, he would counter her lies with unflinching truth. By 9 a.m., he was seated in front of a camera in his home office. The room was intentionally plain. No corporate logos, no trophies, just a neutral background and a single-framed photograph of Rachel holding baby Anna, sunlight pouring through her curls. Linda, standing behind the lens, gave him a small nod. "Ready when you are," she said softly. Marcus stared into the lens, his hands clasped, his voice calm. "My name is Marcus Whitmore. I'm the father of a 6-year-old girl named Anna, and I'm here today not as a CEO but as a father, because the truth matters more than my reputation, more than money, more than the walls we build to protect ourselves." He paused. "My daughter was abused by a woman I was engaged to marry. I ignored signs I should have seen. That's on me. But when I found out, when I saw what she was doing to my child, I acted. I protected Anna, and I will never apologize for that." The next 10 minutes were raw, methodical, and honest. He showed snippets of the footage, blurred to protect Anna's identity, where Candace's voice, sharp and demeaning, filled the silence. He read excerpts from Dr. Elkin's report. He shared the statement from Darren Holt, the man in Colorado. He included audio clips of Anna's slow return to speech, her voice small but steady, telling the truth in her own words. By the end, his voice cracked. "She is not a story to be rewritten," he said. "She is not a weapon. She is my daughter, and I will fight for her until my last breath." He uploaded the video to a private server, then sent it directly to Raymond. "Schedule the release, press conference, national outlets only. Let the truth speak louder than the noise." That afternoon, Raymond called with updates. Her team saw the teaser. They're scrambling. Rumors say they're trying to negotiate a ceasefire. Withdraw the appeal quietly in exchange for you pulling the video. Marcus' jaw tightened. No deal. The world deserves to know what she did, and Anna deserves not to live in fear of her reappearance. Raymond didn't argue. He'll draft a counterclaim requesting permanent supervised monitoring of all her digital activity. Well, cite the data breach. It'll restrict her ability to manipulate evidence or harass witnesses. Marcus nodded. Good. That evening, Marcus and Anna sat together, watching the desert sky shift from gold to deep blue. Fireflies began to flicker along the edges of the fence line. Anna clutched Charlie in one arm and leaned against her father's shoulder. "What happens now?" she said quietly. He looked down at her. "Now we wait a little, but we don't stop. Will she go away forever?" "I hope so," he said honestly. "But if not, well, be ready." Anna was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Can I go back to school?" That question hit Marcus hard, not because of fear, but because it meant Anna was finally seeing a life beyond trauma. "Yes," he said, voice warm. "Well, find the right one somewhere safe, somewhere good." The next day, Marcus and Linda toured 3 different private schools across the Phoenix area. They chose one with a therapy-integrated curriculum, a tight-knit faculty, and a student-led garden that reminded Anna of her sunflowers. Enrollment was approved within 48 hours. Marcus met with the principal, Mrs. Merriweather, a woman in her 60s, possessed a firm yet kind demeanor. Her hands, toughened by years of dedicated teaching, bore witness to her commitment. She spoke to Anna with gentle patience, never pressuring her to respond verbally. Upon noticing the necklace adorning Anna's neck, a warm smile graced her face. "That's a strong son you carry there." After the tour, Anna returned the smile. As Marcus accompanied Anna to the car, she paused, gently tugging on his sleeve. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart? Can we plant some sunflowers here too?" Marcus glanced back at the courtyard garden. "I think we can definitely make that happen." The first day of school unfolded quietly. There were no tearful goodbyes at the gate, no lengthy speeches filled with advice. Just a pink backpack, a ribbon adorning her hair, and Charlie, her beloved stuffed animal, riding shotgun inside her bag. Marcus remained parked just outside, watching until he saw her settle into a desk near the window. She didn't glance back. She was ready to embrace this new chapter. Later that afternoon, the video went live, and within mere hours, it spread like wildfire. It didn't circulate through gossip columns or scandalous tabloids, but rather through survivor networks, parenting groups, and advocacy pages. The comments poured in, a torrent of shared experiences and heartfelt gratitude. "Thank you for saying what so many of us can't. My daughter was silenced too. I see her in yours. Candace tried the same thing with my niece. Thank God someone's finally exposing her." News anchors began to pick up the story, and journalists reached out for interviews. Legal analysts declared the appeal dead in the water. Marcus didn't celebrate with boisterous fanfare. He simply exhaled, a release of pent-up tension. 3 days later, Raymond entered his office, holding a single document. "She withdrew," Raymond announced. "No appeal, no visitation claim. She's gone quiet." Marcus took the paper and stared at it intently. His hands remained steady. He didn't shed a tear. He simply nodded, acknowledging the information. "She knows the world's watching now," Raymond added. Marcus gazed out the window at the fading Arizona light. "Good. Let her stay in the shadows, where she belongs." That evening, he shared the news with Anna. She listened quietly, then reached for her notebook. She drew a sunflower, but this one was different. It was tall, even taller than the last, with roots that burrowed deep into the earth and petals that stretched wide, reaching for the sun. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with hope. "Can we send this to the school garden?" He smiled warmly. "Well, frame it, sweetheart." And for the first time in months, they ended the night without the chilling presence of fear knocking at their door. Instead, they found solace in a quiet home, a safe child, and the promise of tomorrow blooming in the soil they had painstakingly protected with everything they had. 3 weeks after the video's release and Candace's silent retreat, things began to settle into a new rhythm. Anna had started school and had already made 2 friends. A shy girl named Mia, who shared her love of books, and a freckled boy named Jasper, who showed her how to construct paper airplanes that actually soared through the air. Marcus picked her up every afternoon. She never ran to him, never squealed with excitement, but she offered a smile, a quiet, knowing smile, and she waved every time. It should have felt like a happy ending, a triumphant conclusion to their ordeal. But endings, Marcus knew from bitter experience, rarely arrived so cleanly, so neatly packaged. Raymond called one evening with a strange and unsettling update. "I got a call from a woman in Maryland," he said, his voice laced with concern. "She asked if the girl in your video was named Anna, then hung up before I could get any further information." Marcus rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of this unexpected development. Another mother, maybe? Or someone who recognizes Candace's pattern. She might not have simply disappeared, Marcus. She might be circling back somewhere else, using the same tricks on a new family. Marcus leaned forward, his voice firm. "We need to find out where she is. I want her stopped." "I've already started," Raymond replied. "We're running credit activity and travel records, but if she's using aliases again, it could take time." "I don't want time," Marcus insisted. "Then we widen the net," Raymond suggested. Raymond's idea was bold and ambitious. To create a secure online space where survivors and whistleblowers could anonymously report cases like Anna's, a digital tip line supported by lawyers, therapists, and advocates. The goal wasn't just to track Candace, but to shine a bright light on anyone hiding behind family court systems, emotional manipulation, or sealed documents. Marcus funded the platform within 72 hours. They called it Sunlight. Its tagline, inspired by Anna's drawing, was simple yet powerful. Tell everything. By the end of the first week, Sunlight had received over 300 messages. Only a handful mentioned Candace directly, but even those painted a disturbing and consistent pattern. In each case, a woman matching her description had integrated herself into the life of a man with a young child. At first, she was warm and loving, showering the child with affection and praise. Then came isolation, accidents, the child's withdrawal, the father's confusion, and finally, legal entanglements that conveniently cut the father out of the picture, leaving the child defenseless. Marcus read each account with shaking hands, his heart heavy with dread. "She's done this too many times," he muttered, his voice filled with anger and sorrow. "Too many families destroyed." One message, in particular, stood out. It came from a teenage girl named Laya. Her message was short, barely a paragraph, but it resonated with a chilling familiarity. "She told me, if I spoke, my dad would go to jail. So I didn't for 3 years. But I saw your video, and I remembered her voice. It's the same woman. She used to wear sunflower perfume. I used to think it smelled like poison." Marcus sent the message straight to Raymond. 2 days later, Raymond had an update. "We found her. New identity, new fiancé, Fresno, California." Marcus' pulse spiked. "A child involved? Boy, 4 years old. Name's Ethan. Is the father aware?" "Not yet, but we've looped in child services and a trusted prosecutor. They're moving fast." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat in Anna's room, watching her breathe, her chest rising and falling rhythmically. She had fallen asleep with Charlie again, one arm stretched over the bear as if it were an anchor, grounding her in safety and comfort. Her drawing from the garden, the one they had planned to frame, rested on her nightstand, the petals outlined in gold crayon. He whispered to her, even though he knew she couldn't hear him. "You saved someone today, little sunflower. Maybe more than one." The next morning, Linda approached him with a strange look on her face, a mixture of concern and disbelief. "I think you need to see this." She handed him her tablet, already open to a video that had gone semi-viral overnight. It showed Candace in Fresno, standing in a supermarket parking lot, yelling at someone off camera. Her voice was unmistakable, sharp, belittling, filled with venom. The video had been taken by a bystander who recognized her from Marcus' public campaign. Recognize this woman. The man with her looked scared. So did the kid. The internet moved faster than the courts. Within 12 hours, local police had received over 50 tips. By sundown, Candace Jordan, alias Camila Gray, was in custody for questioning. The child, Ethan, was placed temporarily with his grandmother, pending a full investigation. The father, a mild-mannered accountant named Paul, gave a shell-shocked statement to authorities. She told me I was the problem, that my son needed discipline. I didn't know what was happening. When Marcus read the report, his fists curled in anger. She had been days away, just days from completing the same cycle all over again, inflicting her twisted brand of control and manipulation on another innocent family. Later that evening, Marcus stood in the garden beside Anna. They were planting new roses, this time lavender and rosemary, to join the growing sunflowers. Anna was quiet, but she looked more at peace than ever before. "I have something to tell you," Marcus said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Anna looked up at him, waiting patiently. "You remember the boy and the message you read? The one who might have been hurt?" She nodded. "He's safe now. Because of you. Because you were brave. Because you told everything." Anna's eyes widened with surprise and joy. "Really? Really?" She blinked, then smiled, a radiant expression that lit up her face. "Maybe I can draw him something." Marcus grinned. "I think he'd like that." Back inside, as Anna drew a small boy with a sunflower in one hand and a kite in the other, Marcus opened his laptop. The Sunlight inbox had doubled. More people, more stories, not just about Candace, but about others, mothers, stepfathers, teachers, uncles, a growing network of voices refusing to be silenced, demanding to be heard. He realized then that this had become something much larger than their own personal story. It had become a movement, a force for change. Linda stepped into the room with a fresh cup of coffee, her expression thoughtful. "You know this isn't just about her anymore, right?" Marcus nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "It's about all of them. Every kid, like Anna, who deserves to feel safe and loved." Linda sat beside him, her presence a comforting anchor. "So, what now?" Marcus looked at the screen, at the name they'd chosen together, at the hundreds of people waiting for someone to believe them. "Now," he said, his voice filled with renewed determination, "we bring the sunlight to every shadow, no matter how dark or deeply entrenched, and for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something to be feared, a source of anxiety and uncertainty. Instead, it felt like something worth building, something they could shape together, petal by petal, voice by voice, until no child had to whisper their truth in fear again." It was a Sunday morning, bright and golden, the kind of day that made even the harsh desert seem gentle and inviting. Anna sat under the patio pergola, painting sunflowers with broad strokes, her brush dipped in warm yellow and hints of orange. Her curls danced in the gentle breeze, and a hummingbird zipped near the feeder as if checking on her progress, its tiny wings a blur of motion. Marcus was inside, sipping coffee and reviewing the latest updates from the Sunlight platform. Reports were still flooding in, some filled with anguish and despair, others with triumph and hope. The initiative had sparked new partnerships with family law attorneys, therapists, and even a few retired judges who offered to consult pro bono, lending their expertise to the cause. What began as one man's desperate fight to protect his daughter was becoming a nationwide ripple of reform, a wave of change that threatened to wash away the darkness and expose the truth. He had just closed his laptop when the doorbell rang, its chime cutting through the peaceful morning. It was Linda, holding a thick manila envelope. "This was dropped off this morning," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "No return address." Marcus frowned, his instincts immediately on high alert. "Courier?" "Nope." It was slid under the front gate. He took the envelope wearily, his senses prickling with unease. The seal had been carefully folded, as if the sender had taken pains to avoid leaving any traces. Inside, there were 2 items, a typed letter and a photograph. He pulled the photo out first, his heart sinking as he recognized the image. It was of Anna at school, wearing her blue polka-dot dress, her backpack slightly askew, Charlie's ear peeking from the zipper. She was mid-step, walking toward the classroom, her face partially turned to the side. Marcus felt ice crawl through his veins, a chilling premonition of danger. He turned to the letter, his hands trembling slightly. The font was clean and impersonal, devoid of any handwriting, just 6 short lines that conveyed a sinister message. You can plant flowers all you want, but weeds always grow back. You think you buried me, but shadows don't stay dead. She is still mine. And I'm not done. No name, no overt threats, but the message was clear, a chilling reminder that their ordeal was far from over. Linda read it over his shoulder, then exhaled sharply, her eyes filled with alarm. We need to call Raymond and the police, right now. Marcus didn't respond. He was already walking to the security console in his study, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. He rewound the footage from that morning, scrutinizing every detail, frame by frame. At 6:11 a.m., a black SUV paused outside the gate for exactly 13 seconds. A hand reached out, clad in a leather glove, and slid the envelope through the iron bars. No plates visible, no face captured on camera. He picked up his phone and called Raymond, his voice tight with urgency. "She's back," Marcus said without preamble. "Or someone working for her. Either way, it's bad." "You're sure it's Candace?" Raymond asked, his voice betraying his own concern. "She knows Anna's schedule. Took a photo from outside the school. There's a message, cryptic but personal. She's escalating, Raymond." "Him calling in favors," Raymond said immediately, his words clipped and efficient. "Well, get school security increased. Well, file for a protective injunction. You'll have a patrol car on your block within the hour." Marcus spat it out. "And I want every existing camera reviewed, replaced if necessary. If there's even one blind spot, I'll send a team to fix it." That night, Marcus sat at the foot of Anna's bed long after she'd fallen asleep. She looked peaceful, her lips slightly parted, one hand curled beneath her cheek, but that peace felt paper-thin now, a fragile veneer over the vulnerability that he knew lurked beneath. He turned to Linda, who had silently entered the room, her face etched with worry. "She's not safe yet," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Linda nodded grimly, her gaze fixed on Anna's sleeping form. "No, but she's stronger than she was. And this time, she's not the one hiding." They didn't tell Anna about the letter, not yet. They wanted to shield her from the fear and anxiety that they themselves were struggling to contain. But Marcus began taking her to and from school personally again, his protective instincts kicking into high gear. He walked her into the building, waved to every teacher, memorized every exit, every possible escape route. Still, it wasn't enough to quell the unease gnawing at him, the constant sense of dread that shadowed his every thought. 3 days later, another letter arrived. This time, it was taped inside a bouquet of sunflowers left at the community center, a brazen act that defied all logic and reason. The note was shorter, handwritten, and chillingly familiar. A seed knows how to wait. This time, the handwriting was unmistakable. It was Candace's. The letters were slanted, the S shaped like a curling ribbon, just like the notes she used to leave on the fridge. Those seemingly innocuous messages from a past that now seemed like a distant nightmare. Marcus remembered them too well. "Don't forget your 3 p.m. Call. Love you." Now, that same handwriting carried poison, a venomous reminder of the darkness that still threatened to engulf them. They contacted the FBI. Agent Sloan, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a cool demeanor, took lead on the case, her presence a calming influence amidst the growing chaos. She reviewed the letters, the video footage, and the tip-line data, meticulously piecing together the fragments of Candace's twisted puzzle. "She's not trying to stay hidden," Sloan observed, her voice calm and measured. She's trying to control the narrative again, to plant fear without showing her face. It's a calculated strategy. Why? Marcus asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. She knows she's being watched. She knows well, never back down. Because she doesn't want control, Sloane replied, her eyes fixed on Marcus' own. She wants chaos. She thrives in the space between doubt and fear, where she can manipulate and exploit her victims. Marcus exhaled slowly, a realization dawning in his eyes. Then we take that space away. We deny her the chaos she craves. They ramped up Sunlight's internal tracking systems, intensifying their efforts to identify and neutralize any potential threats. Every suspicious message, every alias, every blurred digital footprint was combed and compared, analyzed and scrutinized. Sloane's team ran geofencing protocols around school properties, Anna's therapist's office, and even Linda's residence, creating a virtual protective barrier around the people they were determined to keep safe. 2 weeks passed, an agonizing period of heightened vigilance and suffocating tension. No new letters arrived, no new sightings were reported, but the silence was almost more unnerving than the threats, a pregnant pause before what they knew would be another inevitable storm. Then, on a Tuesday morning, while Anna was at her speech therapy session, Linda came rushing into Marcus' office, her face pale with a mixture of fear and urgency. She left a voicemail, Linda said, breathless, her words tumbling over each other in her haste. Marcus stiffened, his heart pounding in his chest. Candace contacted the teenage girl, Lya, the one who wrote about sunflower perfume. She left her number this time, a blatant act of defiance that sent a chill down Marcus' spine. Marcus grabbed the phone and dialed the number immediately, his hand trembling slightly. A young voice answered, wary and measured, betraying the fear that lurked beneath the surface. "Hello? Lya, this is Marcus Whitmore. I got your message." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken anxieties. Then, in a hushed whisper, Lya spoke again. "I think she's following me. I saw a car outside my campus, the same SUV you posted. I remembered the logo. She used to make me scrub it off with vinegar." "Are you in a safe place?" Marcus asked urgently. "I'm on campus. I haven't gone home." "Good. Stay there. I'm sending someone. Just stay visible, where people can see you." Marcus hung up and called Agent Sloane, his voice tight with urgency. Within 10 minutes, a car was dispatched to Lya's location. Within an hour, she was under protective watch, safe from the immediate threat. And with her testimony, the one she had been too afraid to share for years, they finally had a consistent pattern that connected multiple states, aliases, and victims, a web of deceit that stretched across the country. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was a manhunt, a desperate race against time to stop a predator before she could claim another victim. That night, as Marcus tucked Anna into bed, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a wisdom that belied her young age. "You look tired," she whispered softly, her voice barely audible. He smiled gently, trying to mask the fear and exhaustion that weighed heavily on his shoulders. "A little. There are bad people coming back, baby." He froze, realizing what he had said, then met her gaze, his heart aching with tenderness. "Yes," he said, his voice firm but reassuring. "But we're not afraid of them anymore." Anna nodded, accepting his words with unwavering trust. She rolled over and pulled Charlie into her arms, burying her face in his soft fur. "I'll protect you," she mumbled sleepily, her voice fading into a murmur. Marcus watched her until her breathing deepened, her chest rising and falling rhythmically, then stepped outside into the cool desert night, seeking solace in the vastness of the starry sky. Overhead, the stars blinked silently, indifferent to the drama unfolding below. She was watching, waiting, plotting her next move. But so were they, and this time, she wasn't the only one with shadows, the only one who knew how to play the game of deception and fear. The heat came early that week, settling over Phoenix like a malevolent warning, a stifling blanket that suffocated the city. Even before sunrise, the wind carried a dry hush that made the skin prickle, a premonition of the scorching days to come. Marcus stood at the edge of the garden, watching the sunflowers bend slightly toward the east, their faces tilted towards the rising sun. Anna had watered them herself before school, humming a quiet tune that, according to Dr. Elkins, was her own lullaby, a melody her mother used to sing to her before everything shattered, before their world was irrevocably changed. Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the voicemail Laya had left, her voice trembling with fear despite her attempts to sound brave. She sounded older now, more composed, but under the surface was the same terror he had seen in Anna's eyes, the haunting knowledge that someone who once smiled at you, someone you once trusted, had become your worst nightmare. Agent Sloan had spent the last 4 days gathering statements from others who'd used the Sunlight platform, meticulously building her case against Candace. 3 more victims had stepped forward, all using different aliases, all tied back to Candace. Camila Gray, Sophia Vallon, Ava Laram. The web was expanding, revealing the extent of her twisted and manipulative schemes. And yet Candace herself remained a ghost, elusive and untraceable, until Tuesday, when a glimmer of hope emerged from the shadows. Linda burst into Marcus' study with urgency in her steps, her face flushed with excitement. "We found something," she announced, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus turned from his monitor, his heart leaping with anticipation. "Where?" "Payson, a small town about 2 hours north of here. A local woman saw a woman matching Candace's new description, dyed red hair, sunglasses indoors, leaving a gas station with a child. A boy around 5 looked scared, like he wanted to run." Marcus rose to his feet, his mind racing with possibilities. Same SUV, same model, partial plate match. They're checking nearby motels now. Within an hour, Marcus, Agent Sloan, and a small tactical unit from the local sheriff's office were en route, speeding towards Payson, determined to intercept Candace before she could inflict any more harm. As they drove along the twisting roads into the pine-covered hills, Marcus couldn't help but feel the walls closing in, the pressure mounting with each passing mile. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about stopping a pattern of abuse that had already left scars across too many families, about preventing her from victimizing another innocent child. When they arrived in Payson, the lead deputy, a man named Carver with sunburned cheeks and a deep drawl, pointed them to a roadside lodge, the kind of place where no one asked questions and everyone paid in cash. She checked in under the name Amanda Gray, paid for 3 nights, had the kid with her. Clerk said he looked quiet, trained almost, like he knew he wasn't supposed to make a fuss. Agent Sloan pulled on a vest, her movements precise and efficient. "We go quiet, no alarms. If she runs, she might take the boy with her." Marcus stayed back, his anxiety simmering beneath the surface as the team approached room 207, their every step deliberate and cautious. The corridor was shaded, the air thick with the scent of pine resin and stale cigarette smoke, a palpable sense of unease hanging in the air. They didn't knock. They used a master key, opened the door slowly, and found the room empty. Beds unmade, toys scattered on the floor, a suitcase half open with clothes still inside. But the window was open, and the fire escape ladder had been pulled down, a clear sign that they were too late. "She's already gone," Sloan muttered, her voice laced with frustration. "She knew we were coming." Marcus looked around the room, his eyes scanning every detail, searching for any clue that might lead them to Candace and Ethan. Something felt staged, almost too perfect, like it had been made to look rushed but wasn't. Then his eyes landed on the table. There was a drawing, childlike in its simplicity, depicting a boy standing in front of a sunflower, his face scribbled out with furious strokes, and in blocky adult letters beneath it, a message that sent a shiver down his spine. "Hell, forget," just like the others. Marcus' throat tightened, his breath catching in his chest. Sloan scanned the scene for fingerprints while the deputy contacted Highway Patrol, alerting them to be on the lookout for Candace and Ethan. They put out an Amber Alert, this time with Candace's most recent aliases and the boy's description, hoping that someone, somewhere, would recognize them and alert the authorities. But as night fell, there were no new sightings, no leads to follow. No cameras caught her on the nearby highways. She had vanished again, slipping through their fingers like a ghost with a stolen child. Back in Phoenix, Marcus sat with Anna on the porch, his arm wrapped protectively around her. She sensed something had changed, the air thick with unspoken tension. Her drawings that evening were darker, the colors muted, the blues and grays reflecting the somber mood. He didn't lie to her, didn't try to sugarcoat the truth. "She's still out there," he said gently, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and determination. "And we think she has another little boy with her." Anna stared at her picture, her brow furrowed in concern. Then she wrote a single word beneath it, her hand steady and resolute. "Find. Find. We will," Marcus promised, squeezing her shoulder reassuringly. "But I need your help, sweetheart. I need you to remember everything you can about her." She looked up, her eyes wide and questioning. "Do you remember anything else from before? Something she used to say, somewhere she liked to go? Anything that might help us find her?" Anna hesitated, her brow furrowed in concentration. Then she pointed at her ear, then at her mouth. The sign she used when she meant music. "Music?" Marcus asked, his mind racing, trying to connect the dots. She nodded, her eyes shining with understanding. Then she pulled out her notebook and drew what looked like a jukebox, its buttons and dials meticulously rendered. Marcus blinked, a glimmer of recognition dawning in his eyes. "A diner?" She nodded again, more urgently this time, her frustration evident. Linda, watching nearby, narrowed her eyes, her expression thoughtful. "She used to take Anna out to eat, Marcus, you remember? Before the pool incident, once or twice a week, just the two of them." He nodded slowly, the memories flooding back, piecing together the puzzle. "Yeah. I thought it was bonding time. A chance for them to connect. It wasn't," Linda said, her voice hard with conviction. "It was training time. A way for her to manipulate Anna and control her every move." Marcus reached for his laptop and pulled up Anna's GPS history from before her silence, searching for any clues that might help them locate Candace. Sure enough, a recurring pin popped up near Casa Grande, a roadside diner called Melodist Table, known for its retro jukeboxes and its nostalgic charm. An hour later, Agent Sloan and her team were en route, speeding towards Casa Grande, their hopes renewed, their determination unwavering. But this time, Marcus didn't wait behind, agonizing over the what-ifs and the could-have-beens. He went with them, driven by a fierce protectiveness that consumed his every thought. When they arrived, the diner was half empty, bathed in the warm glow of neon red, its retro charm a stark contrast to the grim reality they were pursuing. A waitress named Jeannie met them at the door, her face etched with concern. "She was here," Jeannie said, her arms crossed protectively. "About 3 hours ago, ordered grilled cheese and fries for the kid, sat in the corner booth. I recognized her from the news, but I wasn't sure until now. She left a tip, a $100 bill, but no note. Just walked out, cool as you please." Marcus felt dread settle over him again, heavy and suffocating. "Which direction did she go?" he asked, his voice tight with urgency. "North," Jeannie said, pointing towards the old highway. They chased the leads into the night, following a trail that grew colder with each passing mile. But once again, Candace slipped through their fingers, a ghost with a stolen child, always one step ahead, always just out of reach. Back home, Marcus sat in the study, staring at the sunflower Anna had drawn years ago, the one with uneven petals, its roots tangled like the truth, a stark reminder of the long and arduous journey they had undertaken. And suddenly, he remembered something Rachel used to say, a piece of wisdom that resonated with a chilling truth. The more you chase a shadow, the more it plays with the light, leading you further and further away from the truth. He whispered aloud, the words barely audible in the quiet room. Then, maybe it's time to stop chasing. Time to change the game. He opened a blank document on his laptop and began to type a message to Candace. A message unlike any he had sent before. He made it personal, honest, direct, stripping away the layers of legal jargon and professional detachment. He spoke not as a prosecutor, not as a CEO, but as the father of the girl she had tried to destroy, the protector of every child she might try to hurt again. He closed it with a single sentence, a challenge and an invitation, a plea for her to surrender. No more hiding. Come into the light. And then he posted it publicly, not through press releases or legal channels, but directly from his heart, a raw and unfiltered message that resonated with millions. It went viral overnight, spreading across the internet like wildfire, and in a dusty motel outside Tucson, a red-haired woman holding a sleeping child read it, her hand trembling for the first time, not with rage, but with fear. The post Marcus released was simple, devoid of dramatic imagery or emotional music, yet it possessed a power that transcended the noise and chaos of the internet. It was a letter, a father's plea, written from the depths of his soul, its rawness cutting through the layers of deception and manipulation like a knife through silk. There were no threats, no promises, just 5 plain paragraphs ending with the same haunting words, "No more hiding. Come into the light." By the next morning, the post had over 2 million views, its reach extending far beyond anything they could have imagined. Survivors across the country shared their stories in the comments, finding solace and strength in the collective voice. Parents wrote about their fears, their hopes, their unwavering determination to protect their children from harm. And mental health professionals reposted it with words like necessary, brave, and long overdue, recognizing the power of vulnerability and honesty in the face of adversity. But it wasn't the numbers that mattered, not the likes or the shares or the comments. It was the silence that followed, the eerie calm that settled over them after weeks of relentless threats and taunts. For the first time in weeks, there were no letters, no sightings, no cryptic sunflower drawings. It was as if Candace had frozen in place, unsure how to react, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. For a woman used to manipulating from the shadows, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, Marcus had done the unthinkable. The one thing she never expected. He had turned on the light, exposing her to the world, forcing her to confront the consequences of her actions. Agent Sloan called Marcus that afternoon, her voice cautious but optimistic. "We think she's rattled. We intercepted an encrypted message from a burner phone used in previous aliases, traced to Tucson." "Tucson?" Marcus echoed, his heart pounding in his chest. "That's only 2 hours away. She's close, closer than we thought. But she's not acting impulsively, Marcus. If anything, she's watching us, waiting, trying to figure out our next move. Then maybe it's time we give her something to watch, something to keep her occupied while we prepare our own trap," Marcus said, his mind already formulating a plan. A plan was born that same night, a strategy that went beyond a simple sting operation, delving into the realm of psychological warfare, designed to exploit Candace's weaknesses and force her hand. If Candace wanted control, they would give her a stage, a carefully constructed illusion, and then pull the rug out from under her, exposing her for who she really was. The idea was simple: create a fictional reunion event. Something public, sentimental, and perfectly tempting, designed to lure Candace out of hiding. A staged foundation launch celebrating Sunlight's impact, with Marcus, Anna, and several key survivors attending, a carefully orchestrated display of hope and resilience. The twist: the event wouldn't be real. Just a shell, a press release, a few strategically placed photos, carefully planted hints, enough to lure Candace into thinking Marcus was dropping his guard, becoming complacent and vulnerable. And they wouldn't hold it in Phoenix, their home turf, where she might suspect a trap. They would hold it in Tucson, closer to where she was hiding, making it more enticing, more difficult to resist. The plan was precise, every detail meticulously planned and executed. A closed school gym repurposed as the venue, creating a sense of familiarity and safety. A tight perimeter, secured by law enforcement and private security, ensuring that Candace wouldn't be able to slip in unnoticed. Undercover agents mingling as guests, blending seamlessly into the crowd, ready to react at a moment's notice. Anna would not be present, not in person. Her part would be played by a look-alike, someone with a similar build and coloring, whose face would be blurred in all pre-event images, protecting her from any potential harm. The bait was set, the trap laid, and all that was left to do was wait and see if Candace would take the bait. Within 48 hours, the stage was set. On the morning of the event, Marcus stood sentinel before the venue's main entrance, flanked by Linda and Agent Sloan. The cameras, though props, possessed a convincing air of authenticity. Volunteers bustled about, affixing signs and meticulously adjusting decorations, all meticulously arranged to project an image of genuine activity. Agent Sloan leaned in, her voice low. "We've got eyes on 3 potential vehicles within the perimeter. One matches a model used in Colorado. No movement yet." Marcus offered a curt nod. He was not consumed by nervousness. Instead, he was suffused with a profound calm, a tranquility he hadn't experienced in months. This time, he wasn't merely reacting. He was taking the reins, leading the charge. At precisely 1:47 p.m., a woman with shoulder-length red hair, concealed behind oversized sunglasses and draped in a long coat, emerged from a black SUV parked just down the street. She moved with a determined stride, cradling a boy in one arm. Ethan, Agent Sloan's team, sprang into action. The parking lot had already been placed under tight surveillance, and within mere seconds, the woman found herself surrounded by 4 plain-clothes officers. Candace offered no resistance. She didn't attempt to flee. She didn't even betray a flicker of surprise. Instead, she calmly handed over the boy, a chilling smile playing on her lips, and said, "Took you long enough." The arrest transpired with quiet efficiency, leaving no room for ambiguity. Candace was taken into custody, while Ethan was immediately subjected to a thorough examination by on-site medics. Aside from exhibiting symptoms of emotional withdrawal, he appeared to be physically unharmed. Marcus observed the scene unfold from the doorway, his expression betraying nothing. It was over, or so it seemed. Later that evening, within the confines of the Tucson field office, Agent Sloan and Marcus meticulously reviewed the interrogation footage. Candace sat in the sterile gray interview room, maintaining an unsettling composure. Her voice conveyed no remorse, only a chilling sense of self-justification. "He was broken," she declared. "Like all of them. I gave them discipline, purpose. Their fathers were weak. They didn't know how to raise warriors." Sloan shook her head in disbelief. "She sees herself as a purifier, not a predator." "She's the Lucian," Marcus said quietly, his voice laced with understanding. "But she's calculated. She left those notes for a reason." A subsequent search of the SUV yielded a burner phone, several forged IDs, and a notebook filled with names and symbols, serving as macabre trophies or sinister plans. Some names were familiar, while others remained shrouded in mystery. But one name caused Marcus' breath to hitch in his throat: Rachel Whitmore, his late wife. The date scribbled next to it was from years ago. "She's been planning this since before Rachel died," Marcus whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Maybe even contributing." Agent Sloan cast him a sharp glance. "You think she was involved in your wife's accident?" "I don't know," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "But now I have to find out." Over the next 2 days, with Candace securely held in federal custody, the intricate layers of her past began to unravel, revealing a disturbing pattern of deceit and manipulation. Several of her former aliases were linked to insurance fraud, coercion, and suspected child abuse. Records buried deep within family court archives, sealed under layers of confidentiality, were brought to light through relentless legal pressure exerted by Sunlight's new partners. Emboldened by these revelations, more survivors came forward, sharing their harrowing experiences. But for Marcus, the true breakthrough emerged not from the courtroom or the headlines, but from a quiet moment with Anna. She sat beside him one morning, observing the birds flitting about outside the kitchen window. Her sunflower necklace caught the sunlight, glinting brightly. She looked up at him, and for the first time, spoke with perfect clarity. "Mommy didn't fall." Marcus froze, his heart pounding in his chest. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Anna nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. "I saw her on the stairs. The lady." She pushed. Marcus felt the world around him tilt and sway. Anna had been there. She had witnessed the event firsthand. The trauma had buried the memory so deep that it had remained lost, until now. He held her hand gently, his voice trembling with emotion. "Do you remember more?" She pointed to her head, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's foggy. But the sound," Mommy cried. Then the woman laughed. Marcus swallowed hard, struggling to maintain his composure. There it was. Proof, or at least a tangible path toward it. Candace had not only abused Anna, but she might have been responsible for Rachel's death. And this story was far from over. As one chapter of justice began to close, a darker, more profound truth began to surface. And Marcus knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that the real reckoning was yet to come. The memory lingered, refusing to dissipate. Marcus sat in his study, the late evening sun casting long amber streaks across the carpet. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at the old police report on Rachel's death, the official version of events. Accidental fall. No witnesses, Rachel had been alone, and no signs of foul play had been found. But now Anna had spoken. The woman, Candace, was there. She had pushed. He closed the folder, his jaw clenched tight. It wasn't enough to feel anger. He needed truth, concrete and admissible evidence. And this time, he wouldn't allow buried facts to remain hidden. Agent Sloan returned that night, summoned by Marcus for an in-person meeting. "I need everything re-examined," he said without hesitation. Rachel's case, scene photos, forensics, witness logs, all of it, from scratch. Sloan gave him a long, assessing look. "You're thinking murder?" "Him not thinking," he said darkly. "Him remembering." He took a breath. She and Candace had tension. Rachel confided in me just weeks before her death. She said something wasn't right, someone watching the house, something she couldn't explain. "And you told the police?" "I tried," Marcus replied, bitterness lacing his voice. "But back then, I wasn't the man I am now. I didn't push hard enough. I let it go." "Not this time," Sloan said, her tone firm. "Well, reopen the file as a cold case." Quietly, discreetly. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out an old CD. "We already retrieved the 911 call from that night. You should hear it." Marcus hesitated, then pressed play. The faint crackle of static filled the room, followed by Rachel's panicked voice. "He's not supposed to be here." I told her not to wait. "No, please." A crash, then silence. Marcus' heart stopped. "She was begging," he whispered. "Someone was with her. She wasn't alone." "Huh?" Sloan nodded grimly. "We had voice technicians enhance the audio. There's a second voice. Muffled. A woman? Laughing." Marcus covered his mouth, overwhelmed by a wave of emotion. "Just like Anna said." "It's not definitive," Sloan cautioned. "But it's damning." They reviewed the autopsy report, meticulously examining every detail. Rachel had bruises inconsistent with a single fall, wrist contusions, a small laceration near the back of her neck that had never been fully explained. All of it had been deemed accidental in the absence of other evidence. But now they had motive, they had history, and they had Anna. Sloan made the call that night to the county DA, submitting a formal request to classify Rachel's death as suspicious and reopen the investigation. Meanwhile, Marcus returned to the house, his determination renewed. He began meticulously retracing Rachel's final days, scrutinizing her routines, her journal entries, even her favorite spots in the garden. He wanted to understand where she had been, what she had seen. It was Anna who provided the most crucial clue. She led him by the hand one afternoon to the narrow staircase between the kitchen and the garage, the old servants' stairs, rarely used. "Here," she said softly, tapping the rail. Marcus crouched down, scanning the area. It was clean, too clean. He pulled back the edge of the carpet and found something out of place, a broken screw in the banister, deliberately loosened. Further down, a gap in the wall, the trim almost unnoticeable. He pried it open, revealing a tiny compartment, dusty but not undisturbed. Inside, wrapped in an old silk handkerchief, was a flash drive. His heart pounded in his chest. He took it to his study, plugged it in, and waited with bated breath. The drive contained just one file, home footage from a nanny cam Rachel had apparently hidden in the hallway without ever telling Marcus. The timestamp indicated that it had been recorded the day before her death. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. Candace was in the house alone, searching through drawers. Then Rachel entered the frame, and they argued, the voices muffled but the intensity clear. Rachel pointed toward the door, clearly asking Candace to leave. Candace stepped forward instead. Then the screen glitched, followed by a scream, and the feed cut out. It was enough. Marcus called Sloan, who arrived with a forensic team within the hour. They backed up the file, authenticated the date and timestamp, and confirmed that it had not been tampered with. "This changes everything," Sloan said, her voice tight with conviction. "It's not just pattern behavior anymore. This is premeditated trespassing and possibly a confrontation that escalated to homicide." Marcus watched the screen go dark again, his mind racing. "She planned this long before Anna's injuries. She worked her way into our lives, slowly, deliberately." Sloan nodded grimly. "We need to move carefully. If this leads to a murder charge, her defense team will fight back hard. But we have truth on our side now," Marcus said, his voice firm. "And this time, I won't let the system bury it." The word came 2 days later. The district attorney had approved a grand jury probe into Rachel's death. Candace's legal team immediately filed motions to block the use of the video, citing illegal surveillance and lack of chain of custody. Sloan prepared to fight them in court. Meanwhile, Marcus sat down with Anna again. She had been drawing a picture of their family, him, her, and Rachel, 3 stick figures standing in front of the sunflower patch. "I found the camera," he told her gently. Anna's eyes widened, filled with a mixture of relief and understanding. "You were right, sweetheart. Mommy didn't fall. And now we can prove it." Anna stared at the drawing for a long moment, then flipped the page and began a new sketch. This time, it was of a courtroom, a judge, a jury, and her sitting beside Marcus, holding Charlie the bear. It was clear. She was ready to speak, to face the past, to finish what had been left undone. And as the sun dipped below the Arizona horizon, casting long golden shadows across the house that once held so many secrets, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, real hope, anchored not in justice served, but in truth revealed. And this time he would walk through the fire not as a broken man, but as a father unafraid. The courthouse in downtown Phoenix stood like a fortress of truth and justice. Its sandstone facade gleamed under the morning sun, casting long shadows across the plaza. Inside, people moved with quiet urgency. Lawyers in pressed suits, families in folded silence, and one little girl clutching a weathered stuffed bear to her chest. Anna Marcus sat beside her father in the waiting room, dressed in a gray suit that had seen too many funerals and not enough justice. He wasn't a man of performance. He never liked cameras, never sought the spotlight. But today, he would speak for Rachel, for Anna, for every whispered story buried under legal technicalities. This was the first day of the grand jury hearing. Candace sat across the hall in a separate waiting area, surrounded by her legal team. Her face was expressionless, her red hair tied back into a tight bun. She looked nothing like the smiling woman who once brought Anna bedtime cookies, nothing like the woman who laughed in the hallway the night Rachel died. She looked like what she was now, a cornered predator. Agent Sloan walked up to Marcus and gave him a nod. "We're starting soon. Anna will go in last. Are you sure she's ready?" Marcus looked down at his daughter. She was staring at the courtroom doors, not afraid, just waiting. Charlie wore a new ribbon, yellow, the color Rachel loved. "She's more ready than I ever was," Marcus said quietly. They called him first. The courtroom was smaller than had expected, more intimate. The grand jury members sat in silence as Marcus recounted the timeline. Rachel's unease before her death, the injuries Anna suffered afterward, the twisted trail of lies Candace had left behind. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't dramatize, he simply told the truth. He ended with the flash drive footage, his voice tight with emotion. "This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, a manipulation, and my daughter saw it all before she was even 6 years old." There was silence as he stepped down. Next came forensic testimony, confirming the hidden camera's legitimacy and establishing a timeline consistent with Anna's recollection. Then came the defense. Candace's lawyers painted her as a misunderstood woman, a caregiver overwhelmed, a stepmother rejected, a victim of false narratives. But the jury listened with careful faces, stoic and focused. And then it was Anna's turn. Marcus waited outside the courtroom doors, his hands trembling as Linda escorted Anna inside. She walked slowly, her small shoes clicking softly on the tile, holding Charlie tightly. Dr. Elkins stood nearby, just out of sight, ready to intervene if needed. The judge adjusted his tone, making it gentle and warm. "Anna, do you know why you're here today?" Anna nodded. "Do you know it's okay to take your time?" She nodded again. Then she reached for the microphone. At first, there was only silence. Then, her voice, clear, soft, but full of strength. "She pushed my mommy." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. The prosecutor leaned in gently. "Can you tell us what you remember, Anna?" Anna looked at the jury. She said, "Mommy didn't listen." Then she got mad. She grabbed her arm and made her fall. "I was hiding on the stairs. I saw." "And after your mom's accident, did she say anything to you?" Anna clutched Charlie tighter. She said, "If I told, Daddy would leave me, too." Marcus felt his knees weaken outside the door. He pressed a hand against the wall for support. Tears burned at the corners of his eyes. Inside the courtroom, Anna continued, "She made me sleep in the dark. She said Mommy was watching, but Mommy was gone." "And what about the drawings you made?" the attorney asked. "What were you trying to say with those?" Anna flipped her sketchbook, showing a drawing of 3 figures, Mommy, Anna, and Daddy, with a 4th figure behind them, painted in shadow. "She was always watching," Anna whispered, "even when no one else saw." The room was silent when Anna finished. The jury watched as she stepped down, clutching her bear, walking back to Linda's arms. No sobs, no drama, just quiet courage. Marcus embraced her tightly as soon as she exited. "You did it, sweetheart," he whispered. "You told the truth." That evening, Marcus stood on the back patio, staring into the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in crimson and gold. Anna sat beside him, humming the same lullaby Rachel used to sing. Her head leaned gently against his arm. Agent Sloan called just before dusk. "They're moving forward with second-degree murder charges," she said. "Child endangerment, obstruction, and abuse. It's going to trial." Marcus didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was steady. "Thank you," Sloan replied. "Not just for Rachel, but for every child who never got to speak." That night, as Phoenix settled into quiet, Anna drew one last picture before bed. It was the sunflower patch in full bloom, the stems tall and proud, and in the center, a smiling woman in a blue dress, Rachel, holding hands with Anna and Marcus, no shadows, no fear, just light. As Marcus tucked her in, she whispered, "Will Mommy see this?" He nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "She already has." And for the first time in months, Anna closed her eyes and slept without clutching Charlie. No tears, no nightlights, just peace. Because the truth had been spoken, justice had begun, and the silence that once swallowed their home had finally been broken by the sound of a little girl's voice. The story teaches us that silence can be both a prison and a shield, but truth is the only key that sets us free. Through Marcus' unwavering love and Anna's quiet bravery, we're reminded that justice is not only about the courtroom, but about standing up for those who cannot speak for themselves. It's a powerful reminder that healing begins when we listen, believe, and refuse to let darkness win.